Are you there? Hi. Are you there? Hi, darling. Hi. Hi. Oh, there you are. Look up, honey. Hi. Are you there? Hi, darling. Hi, Charles. Poor Charles. I see you. I see you. Hi. Hi. Hi, honey. You have to put audio on. This is so much fun. This is Charles Gomez. It's okay. Look up, honey. Hi. Hi, darling. Hi, Charles. Oh my God, I love this.
There, you hear me now? You see me?
Yes.
Am I on?
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay.
I'm so glad you're here.
So are all your fans seeing
A
me?
delay. I got to figure out how we get this delay off.
Can you see my face?
You shut this off. What's that delay, my love? Oh, okay. Let's turn this off. I'll turn that off.
You see my face?
Honey, there you are. There you are. Fantastic. So, Charles Gomez, it's so nice to have you on.
Nice to see you, Dina.
You look fantastic.
Well, thank you. So do you. We go back a long time, don't we?
We do.
Dina,
I believe the first time we met was with Carlos. We were reading a play. Is that right?
and you were one of the characters in my play.
Exactly.
You were a very good actress.
Thank you so much.
You're still a good actress, I'm sure.
Oh my God. Thank you so much. Charles, I'm a bit nervous because I read your book and I was blown away.
Really? Wow. Well, that's better than hating it.
I just thought it was fantastic. I'm a slow reader, so I've only made it through 3/4 of the book. But
Okay.
wow.
Well, thank you. I'm glad you like it. It took me a long time to write it, but I think I had to wait till I was this age to look back on my life. You hear a lot of people who start writing their autobiography when they're 10 years old, no, 20 years old. But I waited till I was a little older before writing it.
So endearing. I love the way that you just beautifully slid in and out of the years, front and back, with the way you explained that you would do it going forward and backwards with
Yes.
technical terms from the newsroom.
Yes, and those terms were in the edit room. What we do for the editor, we say, editor, whatever your name is, Bob Kahn or whatever his name, go forward. Or if you want to go back, you say rewind. And that way you find the shot that you're looking for. So I decided to use the same technique in the memoir. So I would go back and forth all of a sudden. And that way I could get a lot of things in.
It worked beautifully. I loved it. I just loved it.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you.
Oh, I thought it was great, and I also love the way that you threaded in your family. And you know what I thought was so interesting? That what a juxtaposition with you constantly thinking that first of all, in high school, you weren't very popular, but you were president, leader of the newspaper, class president, and it was just a juxtaposition of what what your internal thoughts were to really reality of who you are.
Yeah, I always thought of myself as a nerd, but I guess I was a popular nerd because I got elected to a lot of class positions. But, you know, I think I was overcompensating because of the whole gay thing. You know, and back then, we're talking, you know, the early 70s. Nobody actually, nowadays, when you're in high school, you go around, you can say you're gay. But back then, you'd never say it because you were so afraid of how people would react. And if people, you know, people might be mean to you, people might have a different perception. So, you know, it was a time of being in the closet, big time.
Oh yeah, I mean, you know, being a straight woman, you know, I mean, I've never had those fears, but I totally like took the ride with you because of New York and Miami and Honolulu and being around the same age. It was just like I was like, oh wow, this is like. I mean, I have so many notes. I have
Are you going to ask me about Imelda Marcos and the shoes?
well, Imelda Marcos was fantastic, and the story of your mother. So tell everybody. I love the way that your friend Sheila lied and said that she was Imelda Marcos' secretary and called you to say that they wanted.
Should I tell people what she did?
Tell them, please.
Okay, so I was working at NBC, and they received a phone call from a woman, and the woman said, "Hello, I am Imelda Marcos. May I speak to Charles Gomez?" And you know, everybody in the newsroom was going crazy. And where's Gomez? Where's Gomez? Imelda Marcos was on the phone. Well, it turned out that it was a good friend of mine doing a practical joke as Imelda.
Sheila.
But nobody, yeah, Sheila, my friend Sheila of many years. So I didn't know that. Nobody in the newsroom knew that. So when I was packing and she calls me at home and she goes, "What are you doing?" And I go, "I'm going to Hawaii. I'm going to Hawaii. Imelda just called." And she goes, "That was me." So I didn't want to tell the network that, you know, that it was a practical joke because I thought they would be really upset with me. So I go to Hawaii and I end up interviewing Imelda Marcos. So it all worked out.
I mean, spectacular. And then you went to Christie's and you actually bidded on a pair of her shoes and bought them for your mother?
Well, yeah, because when I got back to New York after I interviewed her, I was sent by Channel 9 to cover the auction at Sotheby's, and or was it Christie's? Christie's, right. And so I was there and I was covering the story. And then as they're going around and they're talking about the shoes, and they go, "And this pair of rhinestone pumps, whatever it was, $100, going once." And I just put my hand up, and before I knew it, I got it. So when I got the shoes, I told my mother, and my mother was so excited. So when this wedding came up, a Cuban wedding, and you don't know anything about Cuban weddings, but everybody gets very dressed up and in mink stoles. And so my mother decided to wear Imelda's shoes and walks down the aisle, and all the Cuban women started looking down because those were really nice pumps.
Nice.
Because Imelda Marcos knew how to buy shoes.
Wow.
So my mother felt like she was the queen of the ball.
Wow, what a story. I just love it. I love it. You know, and you know, I just like read every line. It was like your Emmy Award winning. You also are a playwright. You wrote a play. What was it? Bye Bye Blues? Bang Bang Blues.
Bang Bang Blues. It was about a journalist in Central America.
Because you spent 4 years covering the war.
Yes. And so it was kind of autobiographical. And then I wrote a musical about Tropicana, the nightclub in Cuba.
Yeah.
And the play that you were in was called Deal. And it was about a woman a teacher who had AIDS, and she's trying to convince her boyfriend to kill her because she can't live with the stigma of AIDS. Of course, this was way back at the beginning when people wouldn't dare mention that they had AIDS. Yeah. And I think it's very interesting now with COVID-19 because there are some people who have had COVID-19, but they don't want to tell other people that they had it because they're afraid of the stigma. So
Wow.
we've sort of gone full circle. Now we have another virus, and people are so afraid of that. So history repeats itself.
Wow. I mean, it's just, it, it's impressive on how, all of our lives have been changed in just like this last month. It's just like,
Overnight.
just
And
overnight.
we remember to the beginning of March when we had heard, hey, maybe there's one case, and then all of a sudden, the next thing we know, it's the end of March and it's multiplied. So we're living in a different time, and I've thought about writing a book about that for my next book. How are we dealing with this new crisis?
Well, you talk about it in your book too about, and I can only imagine the post-traumatic, syndrome of the war and the, and everything. To spend 4 years, in Nicaragua, right, and Sandinista war and all this, and post-traumatic. I mean, and between, hiding the fact that you were gay, and then, hiding the fact that you had HIV, and then. Well, you keep saying about how you were so worried about whether your father thought that you were a wimp or not. And here you are on the front lines for 4 years. And I'm like, wow, what a brave guy. My goodness.
Well, there were a lot of people, colleagues who died while I was in Central America. But what people don't realize is when you see a body on a roadside, or you see a mother crying for her dead child. So over time, it builds up and it creates this feeling in you that, well, you talked about post-traumatic stress syndrome. You go through these nightmares when you come back and you're reliving what you're seeing. So it was a difficult time, but I managed to make it out of there without getting wounded. But some of my colleagues weren't that lucky. So yeah, I was always trying to get my father's approval. And I never thought that even when I was in Central America, that I was being brave enough or that he would think that I was doing enough. But
wow, it's unimaginable to me. Now, I haven't read the last three, a third of the book, so I don't want to know the ending. But because there's so much, in the first Cronkite. You mentioned Cronkite so many times. You wanted to be just like.
Well, when I was 10 years old, I watched Cronkite when he announced that President Kennedy was killed. And I was so impressed with that as I grew older, I always said, I want to be like him. I want to be like him. So when I got into junior high school and they asked me what I wanted to be, I said, I want to go into journalism. I want to be just like Walter Cronkite. Well, little did I know when I started in television that one day I would have my stories introduced by Walter Cronkite.
Wow.
While I was in Nicaragua. So it happened. And I just I couldn't believe it. What I dreamed about when I was a kid at 10 years old happened when I was older.
Yeah.
So, being a reporter, it was a fascinating experience because it took you to places that you never thought you'd be. And it was truly a worthwhile experience.
Just
and of
amazing.
course, when you talk about being gay at that time, in the business at that time, if you came out and said you were gay, you worried about losing your job or getting fired. I write in the book at one point that yesterday's closet cases are today's influencers. Why? Because nowadays, if you're gay, you can get married, pose shirtless on Instagram, and nobody cares. But back then, you couldn't do that. So it's a different time. It was a different time. And, we have to remember that Anderson Cooper didn't come out until 1991. Yeah. So, he waited. So it's very interesting to have been a gay reporter back when I was and see how much advancement there's been in the years since then.
not only a gay reporter, but the first Latin reporter to go
First Cuban
to be
American
on the news, to be on the national news.
in CBS, at CBS.
CBS, yeah, the very first, yeah.
There was one or two at the other networks, but
Yeah.
I was the first Cuban American, certainly at CBS News. So I felt I really had to speak for my culture or be as good as I could be, because I was representing, I felt, all the Cuban Americans out there, all the Hispanics out there. And, you know, I'm happy that after that, there have been so many Latins who are now in television news.
Yeah.
So I hope maybe I paved the way in a very tiny way for other reporters to come up.
Well, you also interviewed, got a chance to talk to Fidel Castro.
Yes, yes, and that was quite the thing, because, you know, as a young Cuban American growing up in Miami, Fidel Castro was a dirty word. You know, Cubans didn't want to even hear the name, because he was a communist, and you know, the Cubans were very anti-communist, as you know, in Miami. So when I started working in television, I was at BBM in Chicago. There was an opportunity where businessmen were going to Cuba, and I went. And while I was there, what struck me was in the hall where all the reporters were, there was lobster, there was steak, there was all these tables filled with delicacies that the Cuban people would never be able to eat. So when it came my turn to speak to him, I said to him, well, Mr. Fidel, President Castro, you know, I see this wonderful food here, but there's so many shortages in Cuba, and none of the Cubans would be able to eat this. And he looked at me, and I had a name tag that said Chuck Gomez, and he knew that I was Cuban, and he looks at it and he goes, what kind of Cuban name is Chuk? Chuk, because he saw Chuck. And so he deflected because he didn't want to answer the question.
Right.
There were so many incidences like that where I said to myself, I'd have to pinch myself. Oh, I'm interviewing this person, or I'm interviewing that person. So it was quite a ride, I must say.
What a ride. You talk about the music of the day, the films of the day, the theater of the day. So it was just, oh man, it was an emotional roller coaster for me, being almost, you know, around, almost, you know, around the same age. And then, you know, I had living through the, you know, the secrecy of the HIV era, you know, I lived through that as well. And it was really, I just like tell everybody to.
Were you an actor, or were you an activist? I always thought maybe you were.
I was an activist, and my husband was HIV positive.
Oh.
Yes. My husband died of AIDS in 1996. I was married to him for 16 years when he passed away.
Oh my God. So
yeah. So I spent, you know, many years in the doctor's offices. He lasted 8 years after he was, you know, diagnosed HIV positive.
You know, and we've come a long way. So many people who had HIV. I'm an example. I'm a long-term survivor, but there were so many who didn't make it.
Yeah.
So we have to be I'm very grateful that I'm here today and that I'm able to tell my story. But there are so many.
You talked about how I think you believed that you said you didn't take the AZT too, which I think was a good thing.
Well, early on, when AZT came out, I don't know if
I do remember, yeah.
Your viewers know this, but
yeah,
AZT was the only game in town.
It was the only game. Yeah.
Poisonous.
It was poisonous.
Took it, and they would have terrible effects, or they would, I don't know if you could say they died from it, but it was poison. It was poison. So my doctor said to me at that time, you know, Chuck, if you can just hold on, because there are these drugs that are coming down the pipe. And those were the protease inhibitors. So I did what,
I believe, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I waited, and because of them, I'm alive today.
Oh,
my good friend who's a activist, his name is Peter Staley.
Yeah.
And I had you know who he is, right?
Yeah.
I had an opportunity to meet him.
Wow.
And I said to him, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Because of you, I'm alive today.
Wow.
Because so many of the activists, they were the ones who pushed the pharmaceuticals
Yeah.
to get the drugs made. So
Yeah.
um,
That
I owe them
AZT.
a lot
Yeah.
of thanks for what they did.
Yeah, fantastic. And and on top of all that, and we'll move up a little further up. Then you had open heart surgery just recently. I read in the book how you weren't feeling well. You were in Fire Island. Your friend says take some Tums,
Yeah,
and you
right.
ran 6.5 miles. And
Well, the other thing is part of uh, being gay and wanting people to notice you. Because I had HIV and I had AIDS, I didn't want people to think I was sick. So I began taking steroids
right,
over time, over years.
yeah,
So by the time I had the heart attack, I was taking every steroid known to man. Now, did it actually cause the heart attack? Doctors can't say exactly,
yeah,
but certainly it couldn't have helped.
yeah, yeah.
You know,
Well, look at Schwarzenegger.
look at Schwarzenegger, right?
Yeah. But you ran 6.5 miles right after having a heart attack. I read in the book of like somebody else would have been in the emergency room. You ran
Well, let's say it was the AIDS walk, so it was a
a
quick,
walk.
it was a fast walk. But as I was walking, I also have asthma, so I thought, gosh,
Right?
I'm having difficulty breathing. But what it was is that I had had the heart attack the day before, and I was, I kept on going. It
Wow.
wasn't until I went out in the evening and I started feeling dizzy that I went to the hospital and found out that I had it. And I had quadruple bypass surgery, so
I know.
you can
I
see
remember
how.
on Facebook. I remember when you weren't well.
Oh, you remember that? You
Yeah, I
remember?
do. But you look wonderful now. You really look so good.
Oh, thank you so much.
And look at me. When I start getting like this, I start twirling my hair. My friend would say, "Look at you." And how handsome were you when you were young? I thought such a handsome,
Oh my God.
handsome
Well, thank,
journalist. Handsome,
thank you
handsome.
so much. Thank you so much. Coming from someone as beautiful as you, that's quite
Uh,
a compliment.
now, mommy and poppy, I mean, and all the Spanglish that you put in the book, it was just, it's really the way you chose to write the book really brought it home. It was so endearing and your
Well,
familiar.
I could have chosen not to have included a lot of Spanish phrases, but I thought that American viewers would get a kick out of it. And what I would do, I would translate right
You
afterwards.
did.
So I wanted to give people a flavor of what it's like to be Cuban, and at the same time, let them know exactly what I was talking about. So that's all there. You're right.
It was great. It
And
was
there's a lot
great.
of Spanglish. We do a lot of Spanglish.
Cubans
Growing up
do
in
have
Hialeah.
a lot of Spanglish. Yes.
Yes, yes. Well, Puerto Ricans use Spanglish today. Many Hispanic cultures use Spanglish. So, it's a part of growing up, really.
For sure. For sure. So, well, let me see what else. Oh, you won an Emmy Award. You also won the Edward Murrow Award for you actually acted as a homeless person on the street.
Yeah, I was assigned to see what it was like to be a homeless person. So I went on the streets of New Jersey and I grew my stubble and I dressed in dirty clothes. And, I saw firsthand what it was like to be a homeless person. And recently, what happened is that after the heart attack, one of the things I did was volunteer at a food pantry where many low income people and homeless people go to receive food.
Wow.
So I've kept interested in the homeless all these years. And
Yeah.
the Emmy was interesting because I won it, and my parents came up from Miami, and I was wearing a red AIDS ribbon, and they never asked me what the AIDS ribbon was, but
Oh,
I couldn't tell them that I had AIDS, and it wasn't until a few years later that I had the courage first to tell my mother, and then years later tell my father, because
I
in a
haven't
Cuban
gotten that
household,
far. It must be like the last couple hundred pages of the book.
Oh, yeah. Oh, so oh, right. So you didn't read that. You'll see what
No, because
happens.
I didn't want to just go through it, thumb through it. I love books like yours. I love to chew on them. Then, then I look up the songs and I look up the movies, and it just takes you on a rabbit hole. And it's such a true historical, just a ride that you take everybody on with this book. And it's really doing well. It's on doing great on Amazon, right?
Yeah, I didn't expect it because when you write a book, you don't know how people will react. But my publisher called me up when it was in pre-order, and he goes, "Chuck, you won't believe this, but you're number one in Nicaragua history and number one in AIDS in those categories. And
Yeah.
what that means is that you beat out all the other books that deal with that subject
Wow.
um, on Amazon. So that makes you can have the bragging rights of being an Amazon bestseller. So I'm over the moon. I'm very happy, and the reaction, well, with my Facebook followers has been great. And I've had a lot of high school classmates get in touch with me and tell me that they're buying the book. And
It's
I can't
fascinating.
how thrilled I am. I'm very thrilled.
The Nicaragua part was fascinating. I mean, it was just to read like firsthand account of the war of
People
that time.
don't realize what a bloody conflict that was. And, I talked a little bit there about, the planes flying overhead and the bombs falling down and the townspeople, the villagers not knowing what to do and scurrying all around. And I was with my camera crew and we're running around. So just to be a part of that, it was a scary time.
For
But
4 years.
yes,
Yeah.
when it was over, you realized that you had witnessed a moment in history, and that made it worth it.
Wow. Fantastic. So what's next? What's next?
Well, I'm wondering about if I should do a book that has something to do with the virus, the coronavirus. As someone who's lived through the AIDS virus, now I'm into this virus, and I think I would like to interview people who have survived. I would like to interview some of the responders, the healthcare providers, and talk to them. And I
Sure.
think there might be a second book there.
Sure. 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 Oh, Charles, thank you so much. Let's say I just appreciate you so much coming on, and I cannot wait to dive in and read the rest of the book. I'll be east. I'm waiting for, I'm waiting about a month, maybe 5 weeks, and I'll be east. Hopefully, we can talk 6 feet apart.
Okay, great. And
I'll
I
be up in
it
June.
would be wonderful if we could do that. And
Yeah.
I think when you read the book, you'll be surprised by what happens at the end because the question is my dad going to reject me? Will we be able to
Don't tell
reconcile?
me.
No,
Yeah,
not,
I
no,
can't
not
wait.
gonna
I can't wait.
say.
And please, I just implore everybody, buy the book. It's super fantastic. I don't want to know. I don't want to know.
Okay, Dina.
You're just my champion. Uh,
Thank
Tell
you.
Matthew I said hello.
Okay, I will. I will.
You're my champion, Charles, truly.
I love you, man.
I love you too, honey.
Okay. Bye
Bye.
bye.
Bye.